Well, we have to remember that Iran did not start the war. I know you know it, and I know your viewers know it, but this is something we always have to remember because when you listen to Western media, it's as if we started the war. Somehow it's like we're the aggressor, we're the problem. On day one, they murdered 168 little girls at an elementary school, and you think that nothing really happened because Western media is completely indifferent to this, and the United States has never apologized. It's never even acknowledged the crime that it's committed. And it wasn't, and the Iranians are very confident that it was an intentional strike on the school. And the reason is that it was one of the it was a first wave target, and first wave targets are very carefully vetted. They have weeks, if not months, to vet them. If the war is going on for a few weeks and they're looking for new targets, some officer may be in a rush and make some foolish mistake. But that's not what happened here. There was no war. They had ample time. They chose their targets very carefully. This school was well known. It was there for years. It was on all the Iranian apps, the American apps, the Iranian maps, American maps, I'm sure. And but many of the children were children of military officers. And the belief here is that since this was a first wave attack and the target was carefully chosen, the Americans wanted to teach Iranian officers a lesson by slaughtering their kids. And if anyone in the United States thinks this is strange, they all they have to do is come to Tehran and look at the places that the Americans and Israelis have been bombing. They've been bombing hospitals. They've been bombing Red Crescent Society buildings. They bombed the National Emergency Center, which is for first responders. They bombed, I mean, they did so many double tap airstrikes, both the Americans and the Israelis, many across the country. Quite amazing how despicable these pilots are. I mean, the Israeli pilots, obviously, they're all monsters, but it's extraordinary how despicable despicable American pilots are too. So they they widely believe that the Americans carried this out intentionally. Um, yeah, that was the background explanation that Iran didn't start the war. So when the war started, uh, countries in the Persian Gulf were a part of the war. Kuwait, Qatar, the Emirates, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia were all a part of this war. And they facilitated the U.S. strikes. They helped U.S. naval forces. They helped U.S. Ground forces. The United States would fire missiles from their territory. They would fire from inside bases and outside bases. U.S. troops would be both inside bases. Later, they were moved outside bases. Their assets were outside the bases and even in ports. And American planes would land in their airports. They would use the military bases. So they were a part of the war. And some of the countries, the Saudis, the Emiratis, and Qatar, were funding the assaults on Iran. So basically, they shut down the Strait of Hormuz for ships linked to these countries and other countries hostile towards Iran. So Iran did not include Russia or China, and it didn't include Iraq either. After a few days, it said that Iraq is not a part of this. So ships were moving back and forth, but in much smaller numbers during the war. In the ceasefire, the Americans and the Iranians came to an agreement that there would be no more fighting on all fronts, including Lebanon, because there was serious fighting there, and that Iran would open the Strait of Hormuz to further shipping, to more shipping, which would include ships that were from not friendly countries. Yet the Israeli regime refused to carry out the ceasefire. And Netanyahu, I'm sure you recall, carried out that carpet bombing in Beirut and other cities to slaughter people, to wreck the ceasefire. And he killed hundreds of people literally in minutes. And Western media, of course, tried to hide his atrocities by saying these are Hezbollah strongholds or Hezbollah bases, knowing that they were lying because they had journalists in Beirut. And I spoke to two of those journalists, and I told them, "Why are you writing?" Because they both two different journalists called me over a couple of days to get to do an interview for me for a piece that they were writing. And I asked both of them, why are you writing? Why are you saying Hezbollah strongholds in your reports? And both of them said, no, we didn't do that. And they said that the editor did that, and I said, you're complicit. It's in your name. You have no excuse. You can't say someone else did that. So Western media tried to justify the atrocities and pretend that these were airstrikes on Hezbollah, whereas they weren't. And Western media is based in Beirut, so they don't even have the excuse that they had in Gaza. So in any case, Netanyahu wrecked the ceasefire, and the Iranians said, okay, if you're going to wreck the ceasefire, we're not going to open the Strait of Hormuz to extra shipping. And Iran stopped and put pressure on the Americans. And after 5-6 days, the Americans, while they were apparently putting pressure on Netanyahu, they also began a siege on Iranian ports. Why? Because Iran was not allowing those extra ships to go through because the Israelis were violating the ceasefire. And the Pakistanis said that Lebanon was a part of the ceasefire. Trump later said it wasn't, but he was lying. The Pakistanis said it was. In any case, after the United States imposed this siege, after 2 or 3 days, Netanyahu was forced to accept the ceasefire, and the Iranians said, okay, now we're going to allow that extra shipping to go through. But Trump, in response, said, but I'm keeping my siege in place. When he said that, the Iranians said, okay, if you're going to do that, then we're not going to allow ships to go through. Why? Because you're violating the ceasefire. First, Netanyahu was violating the ceasefire, and now you're violating the ceasefire. So we're not going to open the Strait of Hormuz to those ships. And since Trump said he's going to block all Iranian ships, effectively right now, no ships are passing through. I hear that some Iranian ships quietly pass through, but I don't have details. But of course, the Americans have boarded 2 ships. They struck one and they boarded another. I mean, they struck and boarded one and they boarded another. And so this is where we are right now. The Strait of Hormuz is shut, and the global energy crisis, the global fertilizer crisis, the global helium crisis continues to get worse by literally the minute.
And one of those countries that has actually threatened to join the war if negotiations don't go through and the war doesn't come to an end and it escalates is the UAE, which has been on the international front presenting itself as the victim of Iranian attacks. And we just published an investigation laying out exactly how the UAE is involved in the war against Iran. And so I suggest everybody check that out. We're probably not going to have enough time for me to explain all of the points of this investigation, but something that the UAE's foreign affairs minister has done, her name is Reem Al-Hashimi, is, presented Iran's attacks against the UAE as a form of jealousy. Okay, I know it sounds so funny, but it's true. She has recently come out in this interview, I think it was with ABC News, where she says, the presenter asks her, why do you think, Iran has targeted, bases inside of the UAE? And she says, well, we, the UAE, are everything they are not. We have advanced our society and we have the most beautiful buildings and sophisticated society, and Iran hasn't been able to keep up with us. Such a ridiculous statement from her, but I wanted to get your reaction to this video. I'm going to play it really quick.
You have been attacked by Iran more than any other country, and we put together the numbers here. This is from the Gulf Research Center, and it shows, look at the numbers. You know them well. You have been attacked more than Israel, more than Saudi Arabia. Why has Iran aimed so much firepower at the UAE?
Thank you very much, John, for having me. Well, in 40 days, we were attacked a little over 2,800 with 2,800 missiles and drones. And for us, it's very clear that they've chosen to go down this path because we are everything that they're not. We're a model of economic prosperity. We have 200 nationalities that live there. We have religions and cultures from all around the world. We used our oil wealth to build an economic powerhouse. They used their wealth for nuclear programs that are nefarious, for missiles, drones, proxies, etc. So whereas we tried to become and have become an international, global, responsible player, they are a pariah state. And they wanted to break that model, but they underestimated our resolve.
So how concerned are you that at the end of this process, even if there is a deal, that Iran will retain the power to continue once again to attack the UAE?
So we're very concerned because we believe that it's really important that as part of a neighborhood that one is in, that you have neighbors that don't just launch these types of weapons against fellow neighbors. I don't know if you're aware, John, but over 90% of all of their targets was actually civilian infrastructure.
So
Hotels,
they weren't just going
airports.
after the U.S. bases or U.S. facilities?
Not at all. And not even the U.S. bases where nothing was actually fired from the U.S. bases, right? So they really wanted to break what it was that made the UAE special, which is this incredible model of prosperity and tolerance. Now, what we're looking at moving forward is how do you live with the reality of geography in a neighborhood that still holds and upholds not just international law, but also how are we going to be able to deal with a team in the IRGC that doesn't have such hostile intentions towards us?
Well, they are a lot of things that Iran is not. They are, proxies of the United States. They are allies of the Israeli regime. They are pursuing policies across the Horn of Africa and the Arabian Peninsula that are in the interest of the Israeli regime. So, it is a family dictatorship. Foreign workers have no rights. So yeah, I'm glad that we don't have that much in common. But the problem with the Emirates and the Qataris and the Bahrainis and the Kuwaitis, and I mean the regimes, and Saudi Arabia, is that they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to have those American bases, and that they want to help the Americans bomb Iran, refuel over their airspace. Their planes that carry out the refueling land in their bases or base in their airports. They want their artillery, American artillery, to be used against Iran from their territory, but they want to say they're neutral too. So on the one hand, they want to accompany the Americans or assist the Americans in their war of aggression and the slaughter of all these innocent Iranians, including the girls at the Minab Elementary School. And on the other hand, they want to tell the Iranians that, we have nothing to do with this. It's none of our business. We don't want to get involved. That's, no one is going to buy that. No one accepts that. It's like, for example, in the United States, if the Chinese set up bases in Canada and Mexico, and then started firing missiles and bombing the United States from those bases in Canada and Mexico, and also from other bases in Canada and Mexico. And then the Canadians and the Mexicans would tell the Americans, look, we don't want to have anything to do with this. We're neutral. Don't get us involved. It's just ridiculous. And so it's an insult to our intelligence. But the Iranians are going to ignore those statements. The Iranians are, if they are attacked again, and it seems that the chances for war are very high right now, and Trump claims that he's going to be far more barbaric and evil than he's been so far, then the Iranians are going to definitely retaliate. They will strike Israeli critical infrastructure, but they'll also strike the critical infrastructure of the regimes in the Persian Gulf region, no doubt about it. They can't participate in the destruction of Iranian critical infrastructure and then expect theirs to remain intact. That only invites further aggression against Iran.
So I'm going to get your reaction to another thing, which is the main Quran reciter, one of the most famous Quran reciters, Mash'ari al-Afasi. He's very well known. He just released a new nasheed, which is like an Islamic song, saying, "May the Iranian hands perish and those who support Iran perish," and basically go to hell. I mean, it's a really ironic Islamic song because it has no roots in Islam whatsoever. It's very much a political song. But I think, Mash'ari al-Afasi really disappointed a lot of people because, he's one of the most well-known and famous Quran reciters. I mean, I have to admit that I've listened to his recitations of the Quran. Billions of people around the world have listened to his recitations of the Quran. His voice is very beautiful. However, since the war against Iran started, he has been tweeting endlessly about praying for the Gulf Arab leaders. He's been supporting Trump's actions against Iran, and he's really been pushing like a sectarian narrative against Iran that, Shias are not even really Muslim and they're the aggressors. Where the hell was Mash'ari al-Afasi when Israel was committing genocide in Gaza? Did he put in the effort to, create an Islamic nasheed or song to produce one against Israel? No, he didn't. He is acting in line with the Gulf Arab states, normalization with the United States, and pushing this sectarian narrative against Iran. And this one song and these few tweets completely destroyed his reputation online because the global majority is on Iran's side, and they see that the United States and Israel are the aggressors. And it is really exposing kind of this Wahhabi, Salafist, takeover of Islam and the Islamic culture and the nasheeds and the Quran apps and so forth. And, they're calling him out, which is a really good thing. I mean, one of the main newspapers in Palestine, Al-Quds newspaper, has come out and completely destroyed Mash'ari al-Afasi and have said, they've denounced him and said, we denounce this song. It's not even Islamic, it's political. Iran is not the enemy. Iran is not the enemy. The ones who are dropping bombs on innocent children and their schools, targeting over 307 hospitals and medical facilities and vaccine research facilities in Iran, those are the real terrorists and the aggressors. It's not Iran. And I didn't mean to go on a rant here, but we're all affected by this. This is affecting the Middle Eastern culture. And so what is your reaction to this new wave of political propaganda that's coming out against Iran from this Islamic establishment?
Well, he was definitely praying for the death of Iranians, and yes, they did burn alive. I mean, the girls in the Minab school, very little exists of their bodies. They've been what's the word when there's nothing left? They've been vaporized for the most part.
Vaporized, yeah.
And of course, the vaccine research center that was utterly destroyed, that will lead to many people dying. I guess that's something that pleases him. This whole Wahhabi and Salafi extremist trend in the region, in the world, began actually soon after the revolution. After the Islamic Revolution, the United States and these Arab dictatorships and the Israelis, they were all concerned about the spread of the revolutionary movement. And of course, just like Iran, which had a despot, a family dictatorship, we had the same across the region. And so they countered this by, first the Saudis, by promoting Salafism and Wahhabism. And they spread it across the region and across the world. So it was, to a large extent, to counter the revolution in Iran. And it was also used in Afghanistan against the Soviet Union. The first Takfiri school books were actually published in the United States because back then the Saudis didn't have those capabilities. So they were published at Nebraska Omaha University by Nebraska Omaha University Press. School books for children on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan to make them sort of takfiri and so that they would be hostile to the Soviet Union and the Soviet Army and the Soviets as people who should be killed. But also later on, Qatar and the others became much more involved. And sadly, Erdogan began using this tool as well, both in Libya. During the Arab Spring, these oil and gas-rich regimes in the Persian Gulf used Takfiri forces and Al-Qaeda in particular to bring down Gaddafi in Libya and Gaddafi in Libya. And then, of course, in Syria, they carried out this operation under the umbrella of the Timber Sycamore operation that was initiated by Obama. So these forces have always been tools of the U.S. empire. And it's very interesting that, for example, Al-Qaeda, a decade after 9/11, and if one is to believe the official story of 9/11, and people like Tucker Carlson don't believe it, the official narrative, as you can see from his documentary. And it's clear that he believes that Israeli intelligence and perhaps elements of the U.S. intelligence were involved. But Al-Qaeda, which we were told carried out 9/11, literally a decade later, it was being used to overthrow the Libyan government. And so these Wahhabi groups are used as tools for divide and rule, and they've never harmed the interests of the Israeli regime. You don't see any elements of these. You don't see any of these groups attacking Israel. In fact, during the Syrian dirty war, they would target the Syrians, and they would get funding and support from Israel. And their soldiers, their troops or the terrorists, were treated in Israeli regime hospitals. So now they're trying to use these people for Iran, even though Mohammed bin Salman has distanced himself from Wahhabism, but they're using these people in order to demonize Iran. And so ever since I was young, when I'd go to Saudi Arabia, I would meet some of these Wahhabi students at university. They would be like studying Islam, and they would tell me that you have a different Quran. I say,
I've heard that before. Yeah, I've heard them say that. Yes.
Yeah, and like these are not like villagers. These are like those who are studying. That their job is to study Islam and to go and become clerics in mosques across the world. And so they say your prophet you have a different prophet. Your Quran is all sorts of very strange things.
Yeah.
And very bizarre. And yet and no matter how much you spoke with them, it was very difficult speaking to them because they get angry very quickly, animated very quickly, and you'd often feel that they were on the verge of violence.
Yeah.
During Hajj, like sitting by the Kaaba, the holy Kaaba, or in the Prophet's mosque. But in any case, yeah, that's basically, these are tools of empire, and obviously these people will direct their hostility towards Iran. They've never shown any hostility towards the Israeli regime. They've never supported the Palestinian people. They've never, it's very interesting. The only country that has supported the Palestinian cause is Iran. Yemen, of course, under Ansarullah more recently, but no one else is doing anything for them. Building a hospital somewhere or giving scholarships to a few students are mostly soft power, and are done in order to enhance a country's own image. But to actually do something and help them protect themselves is what gets you sanctioned. It's what gets you demonized. And it's not just Palestine. It's also Bosnia. Bosnia, when it was being wiped out, it was the Iranians who went in and helped them and saved the country. If it wasn't for the Iranians, there would be no Bosnia. They're not Shia or anything like that. Iran's friendships are based on whether a nation is standing up to the empire. In the case of Syria, Iran never cared who the president of Syria was. He could have been Christian, he could have been Druze, he could have been Sunni, he could have been Alawite, he could have been Shia. But the fact that the Americans wanted to destroy the Syrian government, the fact that from well before 2011, the plan was to undermine the Syrian government because it would benefit Israel, was what caused Iran to stand up against it. Just like Iran does not have good relations with the Republic of Azerbaijan, which is a Shia country, because it is an ally of the Israeli regime. So Iran's friendships are based on their stance towards empire and towards Zionism. Iran is very friendly to Cuba. It's communist. It's very friendly to Venezuela. Well, its country's been taken hostage now, but in any case, you get the point.
Yeah.
So these people, they don't have any principles, and they are basically funded by these very wealthy regimes that are proxies of the United States.
Of course, and it's quite obvious that sectarianism has been pushed onto the region, onto the Muslim world. I mean, that saying that, really racist Americans use, oh, they've been fighting for thousands of years. I mean, it's simply not true. And this sectarianism really erupted after the Iraq War, after the US invaded Iraq. And they imposed that onto the region. It's always been a US tactic for divide and conquer, and an Israeli tactic for divide and conquer. And I remember reading a study, I think it was right before 9/11, 2001, September 11, 2001, the majority of the Arab and Muslim world supported Iran, supported Hezbollah. And so it was actually a tactic to use the Iraq war and the war in Syria to kind of flip the support flip the support of Iran and Hezbollah against them, and make people in the Middle East and the Muslim world against Hezbollah and Iran, because that 2001 study actually showed that the greatest threat to peace in the region, if you interviewed people in the Middle East and the Muslim world, they always said Israel. But after the war in Syria, a lot of Muslims would say it's actually Iran, and it was because of that propaganda. But now the narrative has flipped again, and people are seeing like, oh my gosh, we were propagandized. The war in Syria really was for resources, and that sectarianism was pushed upon us. It wasn't real, and the people and the countries who are actually supporting liberation in the region, or Palestinian liberation, are Iran, Lebanon, and Yemen. And so all of that propaganda has been exposed because Israel really shot itself in the foot when it launched that genocide against Gaza, and now they're committing another genocide inside of Lebanon. And we have to remember that these Gulf Arab states are 100% complicit in every single action that the United States and Israel commit in the region to colonize us. I mean, these countries are they're standing on such fragile soil. I mean, the communities there, the people there, the majority of the people there don't even support their governments, and they see that the United States, Israel, and these Gulf monarchies are the reason for these wars. And I did get my notes back up about the UAE's secret role in the US-Israeli war on Iran. And I know a lot of these things, but I wanted to have my notes just to make sure that everything I state is like on point and accurate. So obviously, despite the UAE has been presenting itself publicly as a neutral victim, we now know from this investigation that we published at Mint Press that Emirati fighter jets bombed Iran's Lavan oil refinery after the 2-week ceasefire was declared. That's one point of the investigation. Second point is that the UAE reportedly allowed its air bases to be used for operations against Iran, including an Israeli false flag attack targeting Oman. We also know that 2 Emirati Wing Loon 2 drones were shot down over Iranian airspace. We also know that the UAE has an integrated air defense system with Israel, feeding it early warning data to detect Iranian incoming strikes. We also know that the UAE has reportedly lobbied the US to continue its war after the ceasefire and has said that it will enter the war and has threatened to take the Iranian islands in the Strait of Hormuz. The UAE has reportedly deployed Israeli ELM 2084 radars in Somalia to track incoming Yemeni missiles against Tel Aviv. So they're assisting Israel in stopping those missiles. Iran has also accused the Emiratis of seeking to allow their territory as a launching pad for a ground assault on Persian Gulf islands that I mentioned. Abu Dhabi was also revealed to have signed a $2.3 billion contract with Israeli weapons from Elbit Systems. For those who have read our investigations into Elbit Systems, because of the protests against Elbit Systems and the destruction of the property inside of the UK, with the community standing against them, where did Israel go to build their largest weapons factory? Inside of the UAE. Elbit Systems Emiratis, it is called. And so the UAE is 100% complicit in this war and also the genocide inside of Gaza. We also know that Abu Dhabi built field hospitals inside of Gaza that were apparently being used to spy on Palestinians and to collect intelligence on Palestinians that were being bombed and genocided by Israel, and providing that intelligence to the Israeli government. And then we know that, of course, the UAE continues to deny its participation in the genocide in Sudan, but we've also at Mint Press tracked all of the flights from the UAE to Ethiopia and Sudan carrying weapons. And those are by the dozens every couple of months. And so that's what the UAE is. It's I would say, one of the main complicit states helping the state of Israel and the United States commit war crimes in the Middle East and against Muslims. Did you want to add anything else to that, Dr. Marandi?
Yeah, the UAE is the most open about it, but the others are all pretty bad too. None of them have. The UAE has been very crude in its open support of the Israeli regime, and it's not even subtle about it.
Yeah.
In the case of Qatar and the Saudis, and well, Bahrain is more like much more open about it than the others. But the Qatar and the Saudis and Kuwait, they're more quiet about their relationships, but they're very much, they have a very good relationship with the Israelis. The head of Israeli military intelligence has traveled to Qatar. The head of Mossad. There are lots of communications that have been going on over the years. I think I was in Doha once. I'm not quite sure, but I'm pretty sure. I'm getting old and forgetful. But I've been invited by Al Jazeera multiple times in the past, back in the day. Back then, when it was actually Al Jazeera was pretty good, like before 2011, when it became propaganda. Back during the 2, 3, 4 years when it was pretty good. I think I was in Doha invited by Al Jazeera, and simultaneously Shimon Peres was there too, and he went to the studio. I recall being there at the time, but I'd have to check. I'm growing, as I said, I'm growing old. But this is how. These are the relationships that these countries have, and of course Kushner, who is a rabid Zionist, is he gets money from all of these regimes for his investments. They're all, and the same is true with Witkoff. So these 5 regimes, with all the wealth that they have, they've done so much harm to our region. They've all been involved in the bombing of Yemen. They were all, you know, we Iranians, of course, hate Saddam Hussein. In the 1980s, these Arab regimes funded Saddam Hussein, and they spread sectarianism and racism in the 1980s against Iran. But when Saddam invaded Kuwait and they turned against him, after years of sanctions, when the United States ultimately in 2003 wanted to invade Iraq, they supported this. They gave the United States access to their territory and their bases to invade the country. And Iran was opposed to the invasion of Iraq. Iran, despite the hostility towards Saddam, said that the United States did not have the legitimate right to invade the country. In fact, they gave Saddam the chemical weapons. The West gave him chemical weapons, which was used as an excuse in 2003 for them to invade the country, whereas the weapons no longer existed. It was a lie. But when back then, when Saddam did have those chemical weapons to use against Iranians and against his own people, they were given to him with the money of these Arab regimes and the technology of Western countries, Germany in particular. So these countries were involved in the genocidal war against Yemen. They were involved in the invasion of Iraq. They were involved in the dirty war in Syria and helping ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And of course, they had no involvement in supporting the people of Gaza in the face of Israeli genocide.
Sabah erken perde yarı açık, yüzünde güneş, odam sessiz. Hiçbir şey söylemeden baktın ya, bütün dünya bir anlığına düzeldi sanki. Seninle hayat daha az yoruyor, insan kendini daha az duyuyor. Yanında içimde büyüyen o telaş usulca yerini huzura bırakıyor. Biraz daha kal bu gece, hemen bitmesin saçlarımda kalan kokun, evden gitmesin. Ben senden büyük laflar istemedim ki, sadece yanımda ol, kalbim eksilmesin. Dışarıda yağmur ince ince yağsa da bizim evde zaman başka akıyor. Bir fincan çay, yarım